With your Phil Steele Plus tour with selections, another winning week last week, going 3-2 on the plays. It's been a real good run for the Phil Steele Plus tour with selections. You know, back in week 8 and week 9, this tour had back-to-back rough losing weeks and getting a little frustrated. But since then, we have rolled to, I believe it is 9 straight winning weeks, 36-15-2 over the 9 weeks. So it's been a very nice run for the Phil Steele Plus Tour after that week 8 and week 9, 2 very rough weeks. But let's talk a little. I'm not going to talk to you about the championship game. That's a week away. I'll go over a little bit about that next week. There's an FCS game next week as well. Saturday, January 11th, the championship game. As you know, all year long, my average game grades have had James Madison and North Dakota State number 1 and number 2, and they are indeed meeting for the championship game. And both teams have been number 1, number 2 in the average game grades the entire year. So we got the two best teams here. And one thing I wanted to point out with Clemson and LSU, and if you look at the Phil Steele Plus, and remember, all Inside the Press Box members get Phil Steele Plus for free. When you look at when you look at Phil Steele Plus, they're color-coded green and red. So you could see LSU had some problems in rush defense last year. You go back to here, they had a couple of problems, but had a pretty good year overall, though these red losses over here signify that they might have been better than their 4-loss record. They didn't have a lot of red in here, and they pretty much have played pretty good. But this year, LSU almost all green. There has been 4 red games, and they've all come on the defensive side of the ball. Here they failed to run the ball against Mississippi State. Other than that, it's been pretty much green. And with Clemson, they did play a weaker schedule, no doubt about it, but pretty much all green. They had their first red pop up last week, 320 yards passing to Ohio State and 516 yards offense. The red is anything over 400 yards offense and over 300 yards passing. So those were the first 2 reds that have popped up on the Clemson number all year. And they beat a pretty good Ohio State team, 29-23. Ohio State, we'll see if Ohio State had any red here during the course of the year. Go to FBS team pages. We're going to click on Ohio State. Their only red came here. They gave up 305 yards passing to Michigan, 200 yards rushing to Wisconsin, 432 yards. Other than that, pure green. They actually came up number 1 in the average game grade for the year. Just dominating teams on a week-to-week basis, and a tough loss to Clemson for Ohio State. But they are the average game grade champ at 126.5 this year. But I think we got ourselves a true championship game. And for all those folks that are clamoring for the 8-team playoff, really, guys, this year there's 3 teams that needed to be in the playoffs and then a whole bunch of pretenders. 4-team playoff, the perfect solution this year. I'll write more about that in the magazine. Maybe I'll do a Phil Steele Plus tour about it. But I think we got an excellent championship game here. And if you look at the average game grades, LSU's a 118.7. Clemson's a 118.2. We're going to have a heck of a game for the national championship. But more on that later. I'm going to give you 2 NFL games today. Now, I will say this. If you've been following the Phil Steele Plus Tour with selections, on the season, I have put out 19 NFL plays. Unfortunately, 8, 10, and 1. So slightly under 500. We did go 2-0 the last time we had the NFL selections last week. Let's hope we can get 2 winners for you today. So the NFL plays have been a weak spot for the Phil Steele Plus Tour, 8, 10, and 1 on the year for those. The first game we're going to look at, we're going to take a look at Houston against Buffalo. So we're going to put the Buffalo Bills, the visitor, on the left, and we're going to take Houston and put them on the right. Now, generally, when it comes to playoff time, I like to go with the team that has a better defense. And if you do that, the Buffalo Bills are allowing 298 yards per game this year. And look at all this red here for the Houston over the last 7 weeks of the year. In fact, they're allowing 388 yards per game. They're giving their opponents 32 yards per game above their season average. But J.J. Watt went out about midseason here for Houston, and that's when the defense took a turn. He's back this week, and I think his return not only helps Houston physically, but it's going to give them that emotional boost, and they were a much better defense with him. Look at what they were doing here against opponent averages. Only twice did they allow opponents above their season average with Watt in the lineup. They were allowing all good numbers here. They only had one red total. The Reds come lately. So I think we're going to have an improved Houston offense down the stretch, or Houston defense down the stretch. And for Buffalo, they got a lot of red on the offensive side of the ball. Under 270, under 270, 268, 261, 209, 268, 253. Josh Allen's first road start for them. And if you take a look at Buffalo, a lot of their wins this year have come against weak opponents. The Jets, the Giants, Cincinnati to start out the year. When they've taken on teams with a winning record, New England, they lost. They lost by 6. So they did give them a very good game. Philadelphia had a winning record. They lost. Next team with the winning record, Dallas, they did beat them on the road 26. Well, no, Dallas didn't have a winning record. They were 8-8. Baltimore, they lost to. And New England, they lost to. Against teams with a winning record this year, Tennessee was the one team they beat with the winning record right here, 14-7. They are 1-4 straight up against teams with the winning record. Now, Houston is 3-3 against teams with the winning record, but this one doesn't count. This loss to Tennessee. If we go click on the individual player stats, you will see they did not play Deshaun Watson here for the game. It was A.J. McCarron, so they played a lot of backups in this game. And that would be part of the reason. As you see here, look at the receiving corps. Hopkins, nothing. Fuller, nothing. So they pretty much rested their regulars. I'm not counting that as a loss. That's just a no-show, resting your players for the playoff. So they went 3-2 versus teams with the winning record. They lost to the Saints by 2 for one of their losses this year. They did beat the Chiefs on the road, which was a pretty big win. They lost to Baltimore, as everybody has pretty much this year. They did beat the New England Patriots at home by 6. That's impressive. And they beat the Tennessee Titans by 3, which is impressive. And all that's good because Houston's -2.5 for this game. So they're not even laying a full field goal. They're at home. They've got the emotional return of J.J. Watt. You know, Buffalo's made the playoffs just once this millennium, and they lost that playoff game. It's been 24 years since Buffalo won a playoff game. So you're talking about a team with the first-time playoff starting quarterback in Josh Allen, just their second playoff appearance this millennium, and that's, of course, starts back in 2000. And a weak offense. I have got to go with Houston in this one, minus the 2.5. I like the Texans. I know Buffalo has shown the better defense this year. I like what Buffalo brings physically along the line of scrimmage, but I think Houston, with that emotional edge, being at home, they did gain some playoff experience last year. Granted, they lost to the Indianapolis Colts at home, but at least they got that playoff experience last year, and I think they'll be better for it. So I like the Houston Texans minus 2.5 over Buffalo. A couple other notes for you before I get to your second selection. I only have 2 for you today, 2 NFL selections for you on the tape, but a little more house cleaning. The inside the press box for the postseason, the Bulls, 8-6 on the best bets. I thought it was going to be much bigger. We went into the New Year's Day, and I was thinking we're going to have a big day here, and they went 8-6 overall. New Year's Day was 1-2. 2 disappointing things. The things that surprised me on New Year's Day, there's 2 things that surprised me. And just a quick recap of that. You go back and look at this Minnesota-Auburn game, and really I liked Auburn in this game to win it, and they not only got beat by Minnesota, and that doesn't surprise me. Bowls happen. Teams can win. Here's the thing that surprised me about this game. Look at Minnesota. The stats aren't up there. Sorry about that. But for that game, Auburn was outgained severely by Minnesota in that game. So, sorry the stats aren't up. They'll be up if you're playing around on Phil Steele Plus a little bit later. They'll be up. But Minnesota had a large edge, both yardage, first downs. That really surprised me in that game. And then the Georgia-Baylor game, the thing that surprised me, Georgia was missing about 15 players for this game. Once again, the stats aren't up there yet for Georgia and Baylor. They'll be up by the time you see this video. But for the Georgia-Baylor game, Georgia was missing about 15 players and still got the win over Baylor. So that 1-2 New Year's Day dropped the overall best bet record to 8-6 for Inside the Press Box. And a quick note for you for Inside the Press Box: if you want to get all 4 weeks of the playoffs, go to InsideThePressBox.com or just go to the Phil Steele store right here, and you can get Inside the Press Box. Todd will put the NFL only playoff package up here. Here's the Phil Steele season pass. No, that's Phil Steele Plus. You get Phil Steele Plus with Inside the Press Box. It's $59. The code is $49 with the code word STEEL19. And the price for next year, we're starting to take orders for it now. $149 for the college, $149 for the NFL. Then it's regular season only. If you want to get everything, including through the Super Bowl, it's $259. Go to InsideThePressBox.com or go to the Phil Steele store for that. All right, so let's take a look now at the second NFL game for today. So we're going to click to our NFL team pages and NFL team pages here. And we're going to take a look at a matchup in the NFC, Seattle and Philadelphia. And this one, I'm actually not picking a side. We're going to go with a total in this one. Now, as you know, the Philadelphia Eagles skill players are just wiped out. Their receiving core wiped out. Their running back, Boston Scott, was on the practice squad earlier this year. Zach Ertz got injured last week. May play this week, but got injured last week. So they are depleted at the skill players. And Seattle's depleted at running back. They did bring back Marshawn Lynch last week. He got in some action. See if the individual player stats are updated. They are. There's Lynch right there, 12 of 34 last week. Not like beast mode, but did get I believe he got a touchdown in that game. So both teams a little depleted in the skill positions. And they met here in Philadelphia earlier this year. The final score was 17-9. Only 348 to 344 in the yards, 26 total points for the game. I'm expecting a similar game here, and it surprised me a little that the total was 45.5. Now, naturally coming in, when I started looking at this game, I wanted to go against the NFC East team. Whoever wins the East doesn't belong to be in the playoffs. They just got there because they played in a very weak division. Seattle, meanwhile, go back to that game they played last week against San Francisco. They were very close to wrapping up the division title. They were on the 1-yard line at the end of the game, down 26-21, with a chance to win their division and go to 12-4. They ended up not getting it in the end zone, came up inches short of the division title. So I think you have an underrated Seattle against a Philadelphia team that probably doesn't deserve to be in the playoff. And while they won their last 4 games, hey, they were against the Giants, Washington, Dallas, and the Giants. They were all against the NFC East. And that's the weakest division in football. So Seattle is 7-1 on the road this year. 1, 2, 3, 4. Their only loss on the road came against the Rams, 28-12. So you got to like that. They've got the playoff experienced quarterback with Russell Wilson. This is Carson Wentz's first playoff start. But both teams are depleted offensively, and I actually like the total even a little more than the Seattle side. Look at Philadelphia's defense at home. This one really jumped out at me when I was using my Phil Steele Plus. It gives you home and away averages. The Eagles allow 391 yards per game on the road. How about 274 at home? Wow. Now, keep in mind, even when they're playing the East, they have to play 3 on the road, 3 at home. So, I mean, 3, that's a huge difference. I don't know if I've seen that big of a difference before. The Eagles' defense, much better at home, allowing 117 yards per game less. And if you take a look at how the Eagles have done in the big games against teams with a winning record, or against in big games. Dallas was a big game of 17-9. Washington, no. Seattle, 17-9. New England, 17-10. Those were all big games. Even a Buffalo game, which had 44 points, that would go under this total of 45.5. So in their last 4 big games, they've gone under the total in each one. And for Seattle, when they get in the playoffs now, they've been in the playoffs 3 of the last 4 years. Their first playoff game, if we take a look at their first playoff game, last year it got to 46, which would have been over this total. But prior to that, their first playoff game, they had 26-6 here, and their previous one to that, 10-9. So in their first playoff game, they're averaging 32 combined points in those games. So they met this year. The last 4, last 4 against playoff teams, Philadelphia has been under the total. I'm going to go with under 45.5 as the best play in this one. I do think Seattle's going to win the game. They are favored. Seattle's 1.5-point favorite in the game. But your two Phil Steele Plus selections for this week would be Houston minus the 2.5 and under 45.5 in Seattle and Philadelphia. Now, next week, I'll be back. We'll have something. If you take a look at our FCS team pages, they are completely updated. And let me just click on James Madison just so we see what we got here. We got James Madison, which is number 1 in my average game grades. And if we go to North Dakota State, the perennial champs, I mean, look at this. North Dakota State won the championship. They actually lost to James Madison in 2016, won the championship. You get it. And for FCS, by the way, you can keep going back. Here's won the championship, color-coded green and red all the way back to that. They've got individual stat leaders, so if you want to know who the quarterback is, it's Trey Lance hitting 67%, Ben DiNucci, the Pitt transfer, hitting 71%, how the defenses fare, but it's number 1 against number 2, and once again, very close. Should be a great game. I think we got 2 excellent title games coming up. I'll have more on the FCS, more on the FBS for you, and I'll have some more playoff picks for you, and hopefully if we win both this week, we can get that NFL record back up to 500 for the season of Phil Steele Plus. And thanks for watching. Thanks for taking the Phil Steele Plus tour, and I'll talk to you next Friday with more free selections for